Welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast, where we break down the practical strategies of this emerging science, starting with healthy light habits and going wherever the quantum superhighway takes us. This is your host, executive and life coach Meredith Oak, with a quick reminder that podcasts are conversations, not consultations, and definitely not medical advice. We're here for informational purposes only. To follow up with our amazing guests, please do check out the show notes, and to stay in the loop with the QBC podcast, join our email list, also linked in the show notes. The more people I talk to about quantum biology, the more fascinating and interesting the human body and mind become. Today, I'm speaking with Amanda Steencken. Amanda has a PhD in neuroscience, and she taught at medical school. She taught anatomy and neuroanatomy for many years. Before going down the rabbit hole of primitive reflexes, naturopathy, and of course, circadian and quantum biology. So in our conversation today, Amanda ties all those things together through the lens of a person working on her own health, as well as the health of her family, and particularly her teenage children. She goes into a lot of interesting detail about how our brains work and how they're connected to and in relationship with our bodies all the time, and how the slightest little change, be it with light or movement, can have a profound impact on the way that our brain works. This is a really inspiring conversation, and I really enjoyed it, especially the idea that it's not always these huge, big overhauls that have the biggest effects. It can be small little things that we do, right? As Coach Jim Laird says, small hinges swing big doors. And my conversation with Amanda today is a really great example of that. Enjoy. All right, Amanda Steencken, welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. I'm so excited to dive into this with you.
Good to be here. I'm excited.
Okay, so let's just get started. Give us a little slight overview of your traditional professional background, and then we'll move into where you are now.
Sure. So I actually originally started as a musician. I did a piano performance major in college. I switched to composition. I finished that and ended up coming up to the US. I'm originally from Argentina. And I ended up coming to the US to go to graduate school here. And I did all my PhD work in neuroscience, did a lot of research in spinal cord injury, worked doing research for that and that for a few years, and decided I didn't want to deal with all the money part, getting grants, writing grants. I really loved the experiment side of things, but it was just a very, very competitive and stressful environment. I also got married somewhere along the way, had a couple kids. And one of the things that I've always liked to do is to teach. So I ended up on staff. I was assistant professor at the local medical school here in Syracuse, New York for many years. And I taught gross anatomy and neuroanatomy to future doctors, to future PTs, to future physician's assistants. And I loved it. And then COVID hit and we went remote, and there were a lot of regulations in New York that really made it very, very hard to teach. So I decided to resign. It was a very, very hard decision, but at the same time, the day that I handed in my letter was a sad day and a joyful day. The weight was lifted, and I had already gone back to school to do some coursework in traditional naturopathy. And all along that time, this has been a very momentous last 4 years. I stumbled upon for health reasons, personal health reasons, and my kids' health reasons, I stumbled upon this thing called primitive reflex integration.
Okay.
And that's really where this whole thing totally takes shape. And primitive reflexes, we can talk about it later in terms of what they are. But what got us into it was where I realized that we were falling through the cracks within this current medical system. And thankfully, The neurologist, the pediatric neurologist that did see my son in the ER recommended that I look into a ketogenic diet. First time I'd ever heard of that. I'm a
Okay.
neuroscience person, right? I know the
Right.
brain. There's so many things in the last 4 or 5 years that I realized I was never taught. And so bottom line is, I remember that week, it was a week in August. I looked at my husband after hanging up the phone and I said, listen, you and I are his healthcare team. We have to figure something out because I'm not going to sit around waiting for somebody to call me to tell me when to bring him in. The only options I got were drugs. And then this considerate neurologist suggested, okay, let's try, if you want, look into the ketogenic diet. I know you're going to go look it up anyway. So we came up with a three-pronged approach and the entire family did it, all four of us, 2 kids, husband, me. And it was go keto. Yes, we were going to have my son take some medication so that he
Hmm.
would remain safe. And then the third leg of the stool was primitive reflex integration. And so we did that. It was hard. It sucked. The kids really did not care for the diet part. But at the same time, the more we did it, the more we realized, okay, there's something here. Let's look into it. How is it working? Why is it working?
Hmm.
And fast forward 3 years, I went deep down the hole of primitive reflex integration, working with Kate Wagner and the United States outfit of this particular approach that I had learned about called Blomberg rhythmic movement training. A couple years into this whole plan, or 9 months in, we kind of backed off of full keto and stayed as clean as we could. But the kids, it's hard with kids in this world,
Yeah.
very hard.
Yeah.
And
I
then a
found
couple,
I found light in order to not have to make everyone go keto. Like I can't do it.
well, as you and I have learned with this whole quantum thing, it all kind of fits.
Yeah.
And for me, the light bulb kind of went off when I realized, oh, I get more electrons per gram of fat when all is said and done than I do per gram of carb.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons. Okay, there's something there. Put that on the back burner. Max eventually stopped taking the medication. He only had those two. He's been doing amazing. It's our
Okay.
son.
Yeah.
So, it helped our daughter. It helped all of us. It was just pretty crazy. It's weird how things work out.
Yes.
But the primitive reflexes thing really stuck with me because it's easy to do. It's
Hmm.
simple. This particular technique is the only approach that you can do with infants,
Hmm.
newborns. You can do
Yeah.
it in like 10 seconds while you're changing their diaper. I mean, it's this
Right.
beautiful thing that is easy to do. It's a bonding experience for the parent and the kid. And what I'm doing now that I've started working with clients is I'm finding, again, from personal experience, it is a wonderful bridge into a whole new world of self-awareness and pain, not only pain management, but pain resolution. It's really kind of cool.
Wow. Okay, so I want to get into that. And yes, I love that you did a whole family approach. Or like, okay, we're
I
all
would
going to
not
do
recommend the ripping the Band-Aid though.
it.
Whenever I can, I help people ease into it. I
Hmm.
just finished Sarah Pugh's quantum ketosis course, and I love how she emphasized, okay, don't go full on keto right off the bat with somebody who's just still stuck in the sad American diet, right?
Right.
In the Western diet, you have to go stepwise, but sometimes once in a blue moon, you need to go quick.
So just in case someone's listening and they're not clear what a ketogenic diet is, like, could you give us the 5-second version?
Yeah. It's actually a way of eating that helps an individual mm, recover the metabolic flexibility that we were born with, our ability to burn fat in addition to glucose. So just like you have to put gasoline in a car for the car to move, we need fuel, right? And our fuel isn't just in the form of glucose, it's in the form of fatty acids also. And those fatty acids come from dietary fat. And we have different frameworks in every single cell in us that allow us to go back and forth between burning glucose and burning fat. And it's really amazing. But, and in fact, what's amazing is the brain and the heart prefer to burn fat than glucose. And the parts of the brain that need glucose can get it from a healthy system, from gluconeogenesis, which is a process of turning protein into glucose. So in theory, and this is kind of a mind-boggling thought, very oversimplified, but in theory, we don't even need to eat carbs
Right.
in order to function. So the
Except that
key,
they're so yummy.
oh, they're delicious. My daughter just made some spectacular chocolate chip cookies right now, right before we came on with you. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. So aside from the fact that they're delicious, okay, so in a ketogenic diet, you would focus on eating more protein and fats and not carbs in order to
yeah,
switch over to that fat
yeah,
burning. And this would be important for someone who's lost that ability for whatever reason to
exactly.
burn fat properly. Okay. But then once you've recovered that metabolic flexibility, you don't need to stay in a ketogenic diet, would you say?
Absolutely, exactly. No, and it's
Yeah.
not
Okay.
advisable to do that. It's not
Right.
advisable because we, like I said, we have these systems for burning one or the other type of fuel. And in our mitochondria, which are little engines inside every single cell of us, we have certain proteins, a specific protein that gets activated with electrons from carbs only. And the reactive oxygen species that are produced from that reaction, as long as they're not excessive, actually contribute to cleaning out the mitochondria and
Right.
keeping our system burning clean. So we need both. We've evolved to be able to use both, to utilize both. And
Okay.
nature is a perfect example of the fact that we can do that, right? And, you know, when we start eating seasonally, there are certain times of year where there are more carbs than others. And that was one of my biggest struggles when we went keto full on that summer. I was like, well, what am I going to do with my garden? I had all
Mm,
these vegetables and some of the fruit that was coming in, the berries. I was like, you can't tell me that I can't eat vegetables. How does that work? And so little by little over the years, as I learned more and I realized, okay, no, yeah, there's a time for everything. There's a time.
right.
Yeah.
So there is a time where a ketogenic diet can be helpful as a bridge back to metabolic flexibility, and then we can eat seasonally
Yeah.
um, with the occasional, maybe in my case, daily chocolate chip cookie.
But again, once you get that flexibility back on, the ability to flip the switch,
Hmm.
it's all about balance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I love that approach, and that's why I love practitioners who are in the quantum health paradigm, because yes, food absolutely matters. I don't talk about it that much on the podcast because it's a very well covered topic in the world. But yeah, it matters, but it's like a piece of it's a piece of a well balanced approach to health. It's not the whole thing, which I think a lot of us were kind of led to believe. I certainly was, which brought me to like almost a point of despair because I'm not so good with food. It's not a strength of mine.
Well, it's become a source of post-traumatic stress disorder. I feel
Right.
it's been
Yeah.
so beaten into us, right? And we're going to go back in full ketosis and blah, blah. You know, Meredith, the biggest thing that we really cracked down on was wearing the orange blue blockers at night.
Wow. Right.
Because, you know, middle of winter, shorter days, longer nights. The kids are older. They like to hang out with their friends. These days, kids hang out online.
Mm-hmm.
It's the reality, you know, as much as I would like to turn the Wi-Fi
Yeah.
off as soon as the sun goes down, it's not happening. Not in New
Yeah.
York when the sun in winter goes down at 4:30, right? And so,
Yeah.
but between hormonal changes and all this extra screen time and whatever, I was like, okay, yeah, we're going to cut back on the junk food, which got a little out of hand again, especially after holidays. But the orange blue blockers, I said, buddy, this is the deal. He's like, okay, mom.
Right. And
And
at that point, if it's a choice between putting on orange glasses and going full keto, it's like, I'll take the glasses.
guess what they're going to choose? And that was another thing. Um, Mom, I want to stay up later with my friends and chat, but I know because we had a hard screens off at 8 p.m. up until not too long ago. We would
Mhm.
turn it all off, grab a book. I would fall asleep on the couch anyway. So, but as they get older, this is again morphing with the times and trying to adapt to what the kids want. And I said, okay, fine, you can stay up later, but you got to meet me halfway. And you can stay up as late as you want, but you have to wear blue light blocking glasses. And here's the yellow ones, and then here's the orange ones. It's like, Mom, it
I know.
ruins the screen for my
I know.
day. I said,
No, it looks so bad. Oh, everything looks like,
that's the best I
well,
can do. And
yeah.
but they are amazing because he did it and he does it. And this is, I share this because anybody who's going to listen, there's a lot of us in the same boat in terms of, kids and screens and stuff. You can't fight physiology. And so you put on those yellows, by 10 p.m., you're tired. It doesn't matter how much you want to stay up with your friends.
Yes.
You're going to go to bed. You're going to shut it down and start winding down because there's nothing else you can do. You've blocked that blue light, which is what would rev your brain up.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of
Yeah.
neat
And
to
so
see.
your natural impulse to want to sleep takes over. And
Exactly.
yeah, I don't think we realize how much we're stimulating ourselves, right? It's like with these screens, especially it's like if you have a family dinner and like the lights are kind of dim and the kids are like, okay, and then they go on that screen, it's like ping, it's like giving them a bunch of espresso or something.
Oh, yeah. Well, right. I mean, you and I both know because of this quantum biology rabbit hole, and that blue light for coming off of the screens is as intense as a blue light right now outside at midday, right?
Yeah.
And so it's informing our brain at a specific time of day. And so the brain realizes things, oh my gosh, no, I have to shut up melatonin. Let's bring up the cortisol again and let's keep all the daytime
Yeah,
things
let's rev it
going.
up. Let's rev it up.
Yeah. And
And
so
then yeah.
the whole idea that I wanted to kind of wrap up was food is important, but I'm at the point where I really strongly believe it is not the most important thing.
Mm.
And until you fix the light and until um you become more aware of how to nourish your body water and your mitochondria, it doesn't matter how keto you go or how organic you eat or how little junk food you have. You can abstain from all the chocolate chip cookies in the world, but if you're still giving yourself that stimulation with screens at night, for instance, especially for a 14-year-old, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't
That
matter.
result that you're trying to get by eating super healthy and super clean, you're not going to get that result
You're
if
not going to.
you're toxifying yourself the
Yeah,
with the bad light.
thank you. Yeah, that's
Right.
exactly what I wanted to
Okay.
say. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to wrap our minds around, right? Like it just, you know, um, yeah, it's a concept that really is, I mean, there are some people who don't even accept you have to eat super healthy food, but most of us do. And so then to be like, wait, what? That's not even enough. Or even the most important thing. Yeah, it's a leap.
Well, and what's fascinating to observe is when I propose this to people, they still come back to me and say, well, but I need help figuring out what to eat for my thyroid. And yet, as after I've laid out painstakingly the essentialness of having a healthy light morning routine or morning light routine, they're not doing that. They can barely get out for sunrise and get out for
Yeah.
the early morning UVA window, and so breaking through and shifting that paradigm is really
Yeah.
still a big deal. But I'm excited. There's so many more of us realizing this and in a position to share this with other people. And
Yeah, it's true. And you bring up the light and people are like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like even if they don't disagree with you, it just doesn't. And I was like that too. I mean, I was listening to podcasts on this topic for months without actually doing anything. And then I had a consult with somebody and they're like, why it's nighttime where you are. Why aren't you wearing blue blockers? I'm like, oh, are you serious about that? They were like,
Yeah.
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 Like,
Well, and
oh,
then
okay.
I don't know how old you are, Meredith, but I'm 49, right? And there's a lot of shift going on in women our age. And I remember, I was like, oh, fine, whatever. If I wake up in the middle of the night, it's just. And I remember asking somebody on the QVC, I forget who it was. It was Carrie Bennett or Sarah Pugh. And it was news to me. And I went to school for this, right? It was news to me that progesterone was super sensitive to blue light.
Hmm.
And I kid you not, within a week of wearing yellows after noon, anytime I'm in front of a screen, I'm sleeping it was the coolest thing. So it wasn't just enough to block the blue light with the oranges after sunset.
Hmm.
At some point, because of the additional interplay of sex hormones and neurotransmitters and all this stuff, you have to get a little more intentional about it, and it's
Right.
it's totally worth it because you're not up every 2 hours just because you
Yeah.
neglected to protect those eyes and protect progesterone after
Right.
the middle of the day.
That's a good pro tip, Amanda. Because
Sarah Pugh was the one. I credit to her. Yeah.
okay. So all right, ladies. So we need those the yellow ones, which are the daytime blue blockers.
Mm.
If you're on a screen even towards the end of the day, even if it's still light out, because we become more sensitive. And this makes total sense because I've slacked off. I used to have a on my iris on my computer, so it blocked out all the light. And lately, I've
Mhm.
been using a computer that doesn't have iris on it, and I haven't been wearing my yellows.
Mhm.
And I keep waking up at 4 a.m. every night. Do do do. Like shit.
It's it really is, it boggles the mind how simple it is, and
Yeah.
yet how dependent we become. I mean, this is how I work now. I need the computer, I need the phone, I need the internet. And so I think that that's the truth for most of us. And so we have to be even more diligent about the light breaks and the morning routine habit and um, yeah, all the little ways in which we can support our system because we're completely bombarded all the time, right? With
Yeah.
toxins. EMFs, these non-native EMFs are a source of toxin. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's kind of good news. I always kind of like when I find out because something like, oh, that's bad for me. Well, now I can do something about it or at least make a choice
right.
as opposed to just wondering why like sometimes I felt okay and sometimes I didn't. And it's like, I don't know. And then it's like, oh, you read your iPad before bed. You you wake up feeling like crap. Good to
Well,
know.
for me, I'm excited because it's actually the solution is so simple.
Yes.
It's so hopeful.
Yes. It's
I'm like
simple.
so
It's
excited.
basically free. I mean, you buy some blue blocking glasses if you want to watch, have stuff on at night, change your light bulbs. Other than that, yeah, it's
Mhm.
not a huge intervention.
Well, and it makes everything else that we need to do. Say somebody who comes to this show with metabolic syndrome, right? With type 2 diabetes, severely overweight, they have to lose the weight, or somebody with um some kind of neurological damage, they end up with primitive reflexes that are very active and movement patterns that are suggestive of basal ganglia disorder, and or somebody with heart disease, some kind of post-stroke or musculoskeletal issues. So I really have such hope when I start working with somebody like that because we start with the bare bones basics. Okay, let's get back to how we were really designed to operate. Let's get the light right. Let's clean up the diet. Okay, yeah, we're going to go through the cupboards. We're going to get rid of the Cheez-Its. right? We're going to get rid of the soda. Some common sense things still apply here. But fixing the light and cleaning the junk can be so powerful.
Right.
Discontinuing grains, even if for a few weeks, nothing is forever, like my mentor says, can really move the needle when you're going from, a pain that makes you double over every day after you eat to, oh my gosh, my gut doesn't hurt anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of cool. And so when you're combining it with the light is key, the light is foundational. So
Right.
then you can start thinking, okay, what's going on with that basal ganglia? What's going on with the heart? What's going on with the metabolic syndrome and the type 2 diabetes? How do we help you lose the weight? How do we help you? It's become so much easier, is what I'm getting at. You're not
Yes.
sifting through this thick fog of, well, let's see what sticks.
Right.
The true root comes to the surface once everything is leveled, right? Level playing ground.
Yes. And when we think about not just what we're putting into our body, but where we're putting our bodies, like
Yeah,
what environment is
yeah.
around our bodies, the light that's coming at us, the frequencies that are coming at us, the sounds as the bedrock excavator next door shakes my house. I've been
I
thinking
can't
about
even
that
hear, so
lately.
don't worry.
Okay, good. Um, okay, so let's get into the primitive reflex technology. So we've laid the foundation for metabolic health with food and light. Let's get into this area of specialty that you have developed. And what is it?
So primitive reflexes, I think of as our special superpowers. We're all born with these special superpowers that allow us to survive after birth in
Mhm.
gravity. So they are reflexes. And so by definition, a reflex is an involuntary movement. It's not something that you think about and formulate up here in the frontal lobe. It just kind of happens in response to a stimulus.
Okay.
And
So is that like the old when you used to go to the doctor and they tap your knee
yes,
and you kick up?
yeah.
As like that's what we're talking about? Okay.
So the example I start out with when I give these talks is, think about that, the patella reflex test at the doctor's office. You're not thinking when your leg just kind of shoots out, it just kind of happens. And it's
Mhm.
that the circuit of the input of the hammer to the kick stays local in that the information only goes up to the spinal cord and back down.
Okay.
In other words, it doesn't come up to the brain until later when you're thinking about it. Another example of a reflex arc in our adult life, when you're cooking and you accidentally touch a hot plate or the hot kettle or the hot pot, you reflexively move your finger away. You don't even think about, oh, it's hot, it hurts, I better move my finger, and you move it. 2 seconds
Right.
is too long.
Yes.
That whole reflex response happens in less than a split second, right? To
Right.
protect you, to keep you safe.
Okay.
So these primitive reflexes that we all develop, we are born, we evolve in utero with this program, kind of like computer code, to to roll out each of these reflexes. There are several, a couple dozen of them, uh, in a specific timeline, um, in response to stimuli that kind of the stimulus causes the reflex causes the brain to develop, the developed brain elicits new stimuli, which cause more reflexive responses, which leads to more development, and so on and so forth. When we're born with all the main layers. I sort of grossly divided them into 4 layers. There's a whole lot more, but we're born with all the basic layers that we're ever going to need, from the brainstem region to the basal ganglia, which is the main movement center, and then the limbic system, which is involved in memory and emotions, and then the cortex, which is unique to us humans. But when we're born, those main areas are not connected to each other. They're not linked up to each other. They are just beginning to have conversations with each other, courtesy of these primitive reflexes. And so it is important to provide a safe space for the baby to continue to move, so that little by little, more reflexes can develop, more stimulus can be absorbed, and all the brain regions can get linked up.
Okay. So we're a newborn baby. We have all those regions of the brain that you just described, but they're not fully connected. And then it's through the movement, the baby's movement, that triggers all of these regions to start talking to each other and talking to the rest of the body.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And I would argue, and I think this is in one of our BRMT manuals, I can't remember, we need movement more than we need oxygen and nutrients. I mean, we need it all.
Wow.
Right?
Yes, yes.
But without movement, if that system has the oxygen and the nutrients, but no movement, there's no proper development going on. And
Wow.
so one of the things that really got me to look at BRMT, at Blomberg rhythmic movement training is the name of this primitive reflex integration technique,
Okay.
was that we can do these movements with autistic kids and see improvement.
Wow.
Depending on where they are on the spectrum, we'll see more or less improvement, depending on what people use for measure,
Right.
for an outcome measure. But what was amazing to me was, okay, wait a minute. So what is the true cause of autism, for instance? What's the true cause of ADHD?
Right.
It can't just be, could it be that movement or lack of movement is really more of at the root, at the foundation of this deficit? And it's not just the toxin, it's not just the poor diet, it's not just the genetic mutation,
Right.
have you, right? I think it's a little bit of
So,
everything.
so if there's certain types of movement that modern babies are deprived of for whatever reason, that could be contributing to the rise in certain types of uh,
Yes,
conditions,
yes.
mental conditions.
But think about this, movement isn't just me moving my arm or my head, or the baby trying to move the arm because it's reaching for the binky over there and stuff like that, right? Movement also happens at a cellular level, at a subcellular level, at a subatomic particle level,
Mm,
right? It's
right.
like Russian dolls,
Yes.
right? And so perhaps the baby on a gross motor scale assessment seems normal, but perhaps the lack of movement in this situation is caused by the non-native EMF exposure of the mom during pregnancy, or the toxins, whether it's mercury toxicity or what have you. I mean, it could be a combination of everything, toxic overload. But how is it that the toxic overload is working to cause autism?
Right.
I believe that it's working at the level of these subcellular, subatomic particle levels, interfering with healthy, proper movement. Movement of electrons, movement
Wow.
of protons, movement of
So
chain.
okay, so like the flow of electrons through the chain, all of those things.
And so
Wow.
then communication can't happen between the different brain levels. And so they can't link up. And so then in an ADHD kind of situation, which is the child version of a Parkinson's presentation, think about, it's all movement. You can't stay still. You have to keep moving. You have to do this. In a Parkinson's situation, there's this tremor, that at rest, that the person, what is this movement doing? Whether it's an ADHD or whether it's a Parkinson's presentation, the movement is generating electricity because the system isn't generating it on its own.
Right. Oh, Amanda, that's really good.
And when we can come in and do primitive reflex integration with rhythmic movements, whether it's an ADHD kid in third grade who can't sit still and now got labeled and has an IEP, or whether it's a 67-year-old male or female who just got diagnosed with Parkinson's and has the essential that tremor at rest, what those movements are doing, those rhythmic movements to integrate primitive reflexes, those movements are reiterating, they're imitating, recapitulating the movements that we did when we were developing in utero. And so that's
Okay.
what this technique is all about.
And
It's
so
about,
is that then stimulating that brain connection that you
yes,
talked about earlier that may
yes,
have never got stimulated or for whatever reason got turned off?
exactly.
Wow.
So let's go back to development, right?
Okay.
Here, the egg and the sperm meet, and a few hours later, everything starts multiplying really fast, really crazy. That's movement. Think about that as movement, this
Hmm.
at a subcellular level. By 5 weeks gestation, we have a primitive heart, we have a primitive nervous system. Things are moving, things are developing, but all those cells still in this big bunch are just that. I mean, I believe there's life at conception, but that aside, this little creature that's developing is surrounded by fluid in the uterus, that amniotic
Okay.
fluid. And it's already receiving inputs from mom's heartbeat, mom's, gut juices, the sounds of her digesting her breakfast that morning, light coming through the abdomen, sounds coming through, all of that, the fetus, the embryo is exposed to is causing movement of the cells. The cells divide some more and cause more movement. And then think about the baby at 5 months gestation, 5 months in utero. Already hands and legs are present. We can tell the sex via ultrasound. Speaking of that, ultrasound may or may not be such a good idea because when you put that ultrasound on the mother's belly, the signal is interfering with the fetus's ability to hear mom's heartbeat.
Hmm.
And that connection is essential for baby to develop properly. For
So we're
instance,
stressing the baby out.
we're totally
We're
stressing the baby.
taking away its lifeline. It's like living
And
by the
so the
heartbeat, and then all of a
baby's
sudden it's overwhelmed with this other sound.
exactly. And so then the baby is going to
Whoops.
go into this stressful response because it doesn't know what's happening. And assuming everything else is copacetic and okay, we are amazing. We are incredible in terms of our ability, our body's ability to cope, right?
Yeah.
But there's so many other things that could stress that developing baby. Um, and even in the best case scenario, bottom line is, so the baby now has arms and legs, and all of a sudden, the amniotic fluid transmits a sensation causing the baby to move the hand, and then the hand touches the edge of the sac. And that is another stimulus that causes the baby to move again. So all of these are reflexive movements, but these reflexive movements are key for all the different brain regions to link up. Fast forward 9 months, Labor Day, right?
Right.
And going through the birth canal itself delivers stimuli to that baby's brain that allows specific reflexes to develop and help the baby wiggle its way down the canal and out. And if those reflexes aren't in place, then it's harder for the baby to be born vaginally. And so a lot of these things could be traced back. So non-vaginal or emergency C-sections or so forth could be traced back to, okay, the baby didn't have the proper inputs in utero. And so the proper primitive reflexes didn't get established so the baby could go through the birth canal.
Hmm.
Right on the other side of birth, what happens? The entire milieu of the baby changes. There's no more floating in amniotic fluid. Now the baby feels the pressure of gravity. And all of a sudden, new systems in the brain, specifically the ear canals for balance, the semicircular canals for balance, now come online. And the baby has to learn how to navigate life outside of the womb. And that's where these primitive reflexes come in handy also, to allow the baby, when you're holding a newborn, 2, 3 week old upright,
Hmm.
and this happened to me with my niece a few years ago. Oh, look at how strong her neck muscles are because she can lift her head up like this while I have her in my arms. No, Amanda. Her neck muscles aren't strong. That's the tonic labyrinthine reflex,
Hmm.
TLR for short. allowing her to interact with the environment and kind of causing her to do this reflexively. She's not thinking about lifting her head up. She's just doing it reflexively because her
Right.
body is now developing that whole posterior chain of muscles that'll allow everything to prop up properly. And then she's going to be able to flip over on her stomach and back on her back. And before you know it, more reflexes are developed, and then more reflexes are integrated so that the baby can get on all fours. And then more reflexes are developed and integrated so the baby can sit and then stand and walk. Everything happens on this specific timeline of development. And a lot of these reflexes have the potential to not be integrated or to become activated again. And we're seeing that that's at the root of learning disabilities, problems reading, behavior issues. There's been a whole thing in the last few, decade or so of sensory processing disorder in kids. This new thing. It didn't
Right.
exist when I was a kid, or at least I wasn't aware of, right?
Yeah.
Where's it coming from? It all gets traced back to active primitive reflexes.
Wow. Okay. So what would be an example of this reflex getting interrupted, right? So if a baby is developing the way that it's meant to naturally, there's certain movements that it does. Like I remember for one of my children, I was blessed to have a midwife birth at home, and it was like, as soon as he comes out, we're gonna put him on your tummy, on your stomach, and you got to let him crawl up. I was like, but he's Brandon's is a baby. He doesn't know how to. They're like, he will figure it out.
Yeah.
And he did.
Yeah.
He wiggled on up. And they were like, no, it's important that he does that. And I'm like, okay. But now I understand why. So what would be some examples of like children, because a lot of learning disabilities, it seems like the child is otherwise developed normally.
Mhm.
So what's getting in the way? Where are we like what's going off track?
So something that actually we're seeing even in adults now, but if we could have corrected it, I'm still working on it personally. I got a bigger file, say, than a 9-year-old to
Right.
work with, is foot, hand, and mouth reflexes. So
Okay.
the foot, hand, and mouth reflexes, Babinski, Babkin, and root and sucking reflexes, they develop at the same time when the baby is nursing.
Okay.
So the rooting reflex helps baby find the nipple,
Mm-hmm.
and the sucking reflex, and they all work together. But I don't know if you remember, if you nursed your kids, when you had the baby on the breast, one hand was massaging your breast,
Yes.
and then the feet, at least one foot, if not both, were the toes were kind of splaying open and were flexing, plantar flexing,
Yes.
splaying open. So that's the plantar and the Babinski reflex in the foot developing at the same time that the Babkin and palmar and grasp reflexes are getting stimulated when the baby massages your breast, in combination or at the same time as the baby is sucking.
Okay.
So these three areas of the body, the mouth, the hand, and the feet, are interconnected, not just with regular
Ah,
old-fashioned nerves, but like we know now from, quantum stuff and Carrie Bennett's uh, deep exploration of fascia and water, they're connected by fascia and water also, right?
right. The
And so
quantum
when,
superhighway.
yes, and
Okay.
so when kids have active non-integrated Babinski's or or Babkins or mouth reflexes, they might exhibit, they have trouble walking slowly. These are the kids that run or bust, for example.
Right.
Um,
Right.
they don't have hand-foot coordination. They make
Mm-hmm.
it really hard to do sports. Um, Some, depending on whether the Babinski is undeveloped completely or if it's not integrated, people will wear out the outer part of the heel of their shoe or the inside part of the heel of their shoe. They might have really high arches or no arches at all. All of these things all go back to active primitive reflexes. Um, And then,
Okay, so can you turn it back on then?
yes,
Is that what you're saying? Like that's
that's what
what
I'm
the
saying.
point of this whole technique is.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
the
so you
sooner
would
you
teach,
intervene, the quicker.
okay. All right, so better to do when they're little.
Yeah.
So you have people have a client or a child do these movements and
Mhm.
it's turning back on, it's sending that
It's,
signal.
yeah, it's reminding the brainstem of a movement pattern that it already has in its file. And so the brainstem then goes, oh yeah, okay, yeah, let's get this back online. And in some situations, it takes just one session and the reflex is back on. In other situations, usually with older people, with adults, it takes longer.
Right.
Another example is the STNR reflex, symmetric tonic neck reflex, develops when the baby's going through the birth canal.
Okay.
Um, my one of my kids was a C-section baby. And one of the indications that the STNR is not integrated is that the baby doesn't crawl. Well, guess what? My kid didn't crawl.
That
He
didn't
did
have that stimulation of the birth canal because of the C-section.
right
Okay.
because my C-section baby didn't
Yeah.
crawl. He managed just fine, but he didn't crawl on all fours like God intended. And so eventually he was up and running and doing his things and whatnot, but you know, and so, but the STNR, when it's active, can also have detrimental effects on the child's learning. Those are the kids that sometimes they can't sit up straight. They have to hold on to their head like this. And then improper or non-developed or non-integrated primitive reflexes will have a negative effect on development of binocular vision and accommodation. And so the ability of the child to look at the blackboard, although I don't think they have blackboards anymore in school, right? From the back
Yeah.
of the classroom and then come back to the page in front of him or her and adjust back and forth. That accommodation develops when primitive reflexes are in place. And so if the primitive reflexes aren't in place, that's when you end up with a kid who has myopia or who can't coordinate both eyes to go left to right in that coordinated conjugate gaze for reading. And so it might be as simple as, those are the kids that don't want to read. Those are the kids that say, I don't like reading, mommy. And if you probe even more, they're going to be like, well, the thing is, the line moves on the page, mom, and I can't keep track. Those are the kids that when they're writing, eventually they start going down.
Yes.
They start up
Yeah.
here on the left of the page and then they end up down here on the right of the page. That kind of ability to stay on the midline is not developed because primitive reflexes are not in place.
Okay. So it seems like for some of us, whether it's a C-section or something that had to happen for a medical reason, or just modern life, or just for whatever reason, certain stimulations that triggered certain reflexes got skipped in
Yep.
our development. And so instead of just saying like, oh, they're having trouble seeing the blackboard, we'll get them glasses, it must be their eyes. It's like we're going all the way back to
Mhm.
what is going on in their brain that's
Yep.
not allowing the brain to process this the way that it could if
Yeah.
it was activated.
And as a neuroanatomist, I love understanding this because the same area of the brain where the primitive reflex circuitry lives, which is the brain stem, is the same area where the circuits for the nerves that innervate our extraocular muscles lives. So our eyeballs are moved up and down and left and right by 6 pairs of extraocular muscles. And 5 of those 6 pairs, well, no, 4 of those 6 pairs live in the brainstem. The other 2 live in the upper midbrain, but they're constantly talking to the lower ones in order to coordinate both eyeballs moving from left to right and moving up and down. All of these guys live in the same place. And then to take it one step further, and this is what I love because of my work with adults, the autonomic nervous system lives there too.
Ah,
And the autonomic nervous system, just a quick recap, is essentially the automatic involuntary part of our nervous system that controls all the basic functions that we're not aware of: our heartbeat, our heart rate, our breathing, our digestion, our response to the environment. The sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems are the main branches. Sympathetic originates in the hypothalamus, where light comes in, and talks to the parasympathetic, to the vagus nerve, who lives in the brainstem, in the same area where the eyeball mover muscles live, and in the same area where the circuits for primitive reflexes live. So to me, it's like, oh my gosh, location, location, location. They're all kind of there together.
right.
They are talking to each other. And so this is the other beautiful thing about primitive reflex integration, is that it's a beautiful technique for people who are in a chronic state of sympathetic fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Right.
And
So
this
like anxious.
anxiety, chronic pain, trauma, whether it's big T or little t trauma, whether it's childhood trauma, later trauma, ancestral trauma,
Right.
it's
In our bodies.
in us because our body water holds on to this. Our body water has memory. And so
Now
this is where the
now
quantum.
we're going down the quantum rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so let's
so,
go there. So, okay.
and so when we read,
So,
go ahead.
yeah. Okay, so you've beautifully explained the primitive reflex integration. And now we're layering on the insights that you have developed from studying quantum biology and putting these two together. Because as you were saying earlier, like there's no question primitive reflex integration works. It works.
Yeah.
But how?
Right.
So tell us your theories.
So primitive reflex integration, the way I learn and the way I do, involves teaching the person how to do gentle rhythmic movements. And the key there is rhythmic. And these movements recapitulate the movements that we do in utero and during the first year or two after birth. All of us, to a certain extent. I mean, in a situation of, a baby who's born in a horrible environment or under severe stressful situations or what have you, that obviously those movements are not going to happen, but all of us experience this because we are programmed to do this.
Okay.
So that we can get up and walk and survive. When somebody comes to us and it is clear that primitive reflexes are active because of behavior, because of posture, flat foot or high arch or anxiousness, moodiness, inability to learning disabilities, stress, chronic pain. Here's the other thing, and I wrote it down because I didn't want to forget to say this. Pain is processed in the same area as all our other autonomic processes. They're in the brainstem and hypothalamus. So it's all there, right? So when somebody comes and there's primitive reflex work that needs to be done, when we teach these gentle rhythmic movements, what we're doing is we're reminding that nervous system of something that it already knows.
Right.
And the beautiful thing about what I just said is that we are telling the nervous system something that it knows, and therefore it can feel safe.
Right.
So we're recreating this safety cocoon that we started out our life on Earth in.
Right. So the
Okay?
movements are reminding us,
The movements are
reminding us of being
conjuring
in the
up,
womb,
right,
reminding us that we know how to exist in a relatively calm and peaceful way.
that we have what we need in order to function, right?
Right. Okay.
And depending on the situation, whether we're looking at a 3-year-old or whether we're looking at an 83-year-old, there will be more or less stuff to go through, to get through in order to really get back to that safe place. But the bottom line is we're recreating that safe space. And there are a lot of there are several primitive reflex integration techniques out there that are more intensive and require a lot more involvement of the frontal lobes.
Mm-hmm.
And so for some people, they might be a reasonable approach. But what I loved about this one, about Blomberg rhythmic movement training in particular, is that we can do that with little babies.
Right.
And so even when their brains are still not linked up because they're still in the process of linking up, we can go in with passive movements really quick while we're changing a diaper or while we're, patting their butt so that they can go to sleep. We can little by little, one of the movements is rocking the butt from left to right, for instance. Very soon.
Right.
And look at you, I see you rocking right now.
Yeah.
Another one is, lying on the back with knees bent, and you're just there's method to the madness of a rocking chair.
Mm.
Why do we all gravitate towards movement? Why can dancing be such a soothing thing, right?
Right.
I'm not talking about dancing type highly coordinated movements. I'm talking about really basic things that are going to, I believe, my theory is that these rhythmic movements are doing 3 different things. They're appealing to that safety memory in us, that safety cell memory. They're kind of conjuring it back up, turning it back on. But those movements in addition are sort of a homeopathic version of movement, really tiny, but very powerful. And in their powerfulness, they are generating piezoelectricity in our body water, in our fascia, which is surrounded by body water. And so that is bringing energy into the system, but it's also conveying that information of safety back to the nervous system, back to the brainstem. And it's kind of getting everything back in line. And because of the closeness of the autonomic nervous system to this circuitry, so parasympathetics and sympathetics, we're helping the system get regulated again. So again, a lot of people out there talking about nervous system dysregulation, and the roots of disease are because the nervous system isn't regulated, isn't in balance, isn't in coherence. It all goes back to that. And there's a really simple tool in rhythmic movement training to achieve that regulation, that coherence.
Wow. This is so cool. It's so cool, Amanda. And so then through the quantum lens, or even you can see it as it's like activating the quantum superhighway.
Yeah.
That is our fascia.
Yeah.
So,
and I believe that, again, this is my opinion, right? But based on Robert O. Becker's work on regenerating salamander limbs and his discovery that more is not always better, but totally the opposite. He could elicit more regeneration with less voltage applied to this experimental setup. Homeopathy is another example of that. You have a substance diluted to its essence, its frequency essence, has more power, say, than the substance that it started out from. I can't help but wonder if this is how rhythmic movement training is working. We're doing super tiny movements, not too much. The line in the business here, so one of my colleagues coined this term, the pause is as important as the push. So you got to rock, but you also have to pause for the system to absorb the information you just put in. And then less is always more. I can't help but wonder if primitive reflex integration with rhythmic movements is working at this super tiny homeopathic level.
right.
Which is good news
Yeah.
for most of us, because we come from the school of, okay, you got to do 3 reps of 10, 5 times a week. Otherwise, you're not going to heal.
Right.
And
Yes.
in the PT world, insurance runs out 8 weeks later. And so then what happens? You end up with maybe a little bit of an increase in function, but at 8 weeks, everything tanks.
Okay.
And then people lose function because they're not doing, but again, if we had set them up beforehand with proper nervous system integrity, they wouldn't need so many reps in the first place in order to recover,
Hmm.
right? So this is coming from my experience. I work once a week at this clinic, if you will. My mentor is a PT by training, a physical therapist by training, who's got all these other tools in his toolkit. And he works with a lot of individuals who need rehab after joint replacement surgery, knee replacement, hip replacement. And some of them come to Dave Boyland, is his name, after the surgery, but a lot of them have wised up and figured out, okay, I'm going to go before. I'm going to
Mm.
work with Dave doing these primitive reflex movements before. And Meredith, the recovery time post-surgery is a fraction of what it was with their
Wow.
other joint when they didn't do the pre-rehab, shall we say. It's
Wow.
kind of cool.
So you're preparing and activating your system at the subatomic level to be
Pretty
able
much.
to
Pretty much.
respond,
Yeah.
connect, communicate, do all the things. I mean,
And
our
take it.
bodies are so amazing.
They are.
This is so amazing.
My personal experience with BRMT was that same year that we were working with my son. We have chickens, and I was out feeding the chickens, and I threw my back out, leaning over to grab the feeder. And so I'd struggled on and off over the years with throwing my back out, and
Hmm.
I would go, 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 reach a level of stress, and then my body would say, okay, that's enough. And I would be bedridden for a couple of days until, that's not a healthy relationship to have with your body, right? So I throw my back out. And I'm walking crooked for 4 days. And I called Dave and I said, Max was working, our son was working with Dave. I was taking him to do these movements, but I wasn't
Right.
doing them
I
myself. I
know
was
that's what
watching him do it. I'm like,
such a mom move. We're like,
seriously,
oh,
right?
this is this, and then it's like, oh wait,
And
this
so I
kind of
was
applies
like,
to me too. Okay.
can I come in? Can you help me with my back? It's like, absolutely. And so here we are, right? He's showing me a couple movements. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? What does this do? What does this mean? And he didn't say anything. He's just looked at me and smiled. And he sent me home with a few of the movements, and I was doing them like a good little PT patient, 3 times a day, whatever, which I don't do anymore, right? But
Mhm.
Meredith, my first realization that something had shifted had nothing to do with me feeling better all of a sudden. My first experience of true betterness was my perception of the pain that I was in. The
Ah,
perception of that pain changed. And as I'm rocking in the middle of the night because I was up and it was uncomfortable, I was like, oh my gosh, I got myself on the floor somehow. That was a split-second realization. Oh my gosh, I am not afraid.
wow.
Every time I would
Wow.
hurt, I would tense up because I was afraid of what it meant. What did the pain mean? What did I not do? What did I miss? What do I
Mm,
need to be doing that I missed?
yeah.
That whole relationship with the pain changed. And once I was fear free, it's almost like, okay, now a break was removed. And now it was easier to get through, and the pain eventually subsided, and I got stronger, and I started noticing other areas of my life that were out of kilter. And I mean, that was sort of the true entry point into this beautiful season of
Right.
healing for me personally.
And so the reflex techniques, you started to do them, and it first showed up in your ability to process what was happening
Mhm.
in a less stressed out way,
In a fear-free way.
fear free. Okay.
Fear is the worst
Wow.
four-letter word out there.
Yeah.
And the movements were essentially, by doing the movements, now I know as I look back, in the moment I didn't. And that's why I love this, because you don't have to know at this level what's happening. It
Right.
is happening, period, right?
Yeah. Doesn't matter if you intellectually understand, if you
Yeah,
do the movement, it will trigger the response.
the response, right? And so what I realized I was doing is I was telling my body that it was safe. By
Mm.
doing the movements, I was reminding my body of a safe time.
Mm.
And so that removed some brakes and allowed me to go down the path of daring to move again without fear of the pain coming on. And it becomes this snowball effect in a good way, right? Which leads me to another important concept that has really been the bedrock of my entire new way of practicing, which is if you address your inputs, the outputs address themselves.
Hmm.
Everything in our nervous system requires an input, a stimulus, in order to happen. There is no output unless there's an input. And so when we go to school and learn physiology and anatomy and neuroanatomy, we learn about the five senses, right? Vision, audition, taste, smell, tactile stimulation. Those are the classic five. But although those five are requiring an input in order to elicit the output, you need light as the input for vision, you need sound as the input for audition, you need chemical inputs for taste and smell. You need different forms of touch or needle point or temperature for sensory stimulation. But we also have stimulation in the form of gravity, stimulating our balance. We also have stimulation in the form of, some people are going to call it kinesthetic sense or proprioceptive sense, basically
Mm-hmm.
your ability to know where you are in space
Mm-hmm.
comes from the fact that you are in space. That's the stimulus. We have the food that we eat activates receptors in our gut, causing responses in the form of digestion, in the form of elimination, right? All of those are outputs that require the input in the first place. And this is what I love about this whole journey is mitochondria come in as another sensory organ.
Of course.
And
Oh, that makes
mitochondria
total sense.
are
They're
all
little
over.
sensors.
They're sensors. And they sense that light that our eyes can't see in the form of shapes and color, right? So that's their
Mm-hmm.
non-visual system. And not only do they sense the infrareds and the ultraviolets, but the mitochondria also sense all the other electromagnetic frequencies on the spectrum. And when Jack Kruse said in some interview that anything that comes to the mitochondria goes to the thalamus, I was like, okay, there it is,
There
right?
it is.
And the thalamus and the hypothalamus are talking to the brainstem, which is where primitive reflexes live. I mean, it is all connected and it's so exciting. And
Wow.
so that
And so there it
simple,
is. It all comes back together.
yeah, and that simple input of gentle rhythmic movement that conveys safety is really at the foundation of all of it.
Oh, it's so amazing. And really, uh, even just knowing about this, right? Like releases some of the fear. It's like,
Yes.
oh, it's not it's everything feels like such a big mystery. Like, what is going on? Why is everyone so sick? Why is this happening? Why is there an epidemic of this and that and that and that? And it's like, if we look for solutions, we find them. This is an amazing one.
Yeah. And so the best way to do rhythmic movement training is
Mhm.
outside under the sun on the grass.
Right.
Right. And
Okay,
so
so this is a great place to come full circle before we wrap up. So tell us why.
why? Well, because these are my three pillars. I know people in the community in the quantum business have their own little unique solutions that they
We
offer,
want
right?
Amanda's pillars. Tell us,
But
Amanda.
my pillars are rest, water, and sun.
Nice.
And I say rest because it was a shorter version of this term active rest, which was coined by my mentor, Dave Boyland. And I said, Dave, what do you mean by active rest? It's an
Mhm.
oxymoron. And he said, well, it's easy to work hard, but it's hard to work easy.
Nice.
Okay, so if you do quote me on that one goes to Dave.
Okay.
But the whole idea of, okay, let's find rest in the movement. Let's find ease in the activity.
Yeah.
If we're inactive, if there's no movement, last I checked, that's rigor mortis, that's death. Okay?
Okay.
So life is movement, and life is always about imbalances and figuring out how to navigate them, how to find ease in that movement of the levers, in that, the seesaw of life. It's always going to be going up or going down. How can you find ease and rest in that? Primitive reflex integration with rhythmic movements is one way. I think there are many tools. This isn't the only one, but I love this one because, like I said, it's easy to use with people of all ages, from birth
Yeah.
to death. Water is essential, because if my hunch is correct and rhythmic movement training is working at the level of the quantum communication superhighway that is our hydrated fascia, we need a properly hydrated fascia for this to happen. And Dr. Harold Blomberg, the founder of BRMT himself, refused to work with patients until they got rid of the toxins, whether EMFs or otherwise, that interfered with true cellular hydration.
Hmm.
Whether he knew that was the case at the time or not, I don't know. He passed away in 2020. But the fact that he knew enough to notice that, okay, this reflex isn't integrating, I'm doing everything right. What else is on board?
Okay.
Okay, so the information isn't getting to where it needs to get because there's a blockage. There's a weight impeding information transfer in the form of a chemical toxin or an EMF toxin, right?
Right.
And light, well, we know white light is key.
Yeah.
Sunlight in particular. It increases electrons, period. Infrared and UVs are going to nourish that body water, which is going to nourish the fascia, which is going to increase free flow of information. So that's my three-legged sort of, not even a
Beautiful.
three-legged stool, but this cycle.
Yeah.
And not one thing is more important than the other. They're all essential. Right. And with some
Yeah.
people, I start with light, but with others, I have to just start with the nervous system because they don't have the bandwidth to comprehend that all they have to do is go outside in the morning. That's just too much right now.
Yeah.
But if
Just
I go in and rock them or show them how to rock, that's a beautiful entry point.
wow. And so then we put ourselves in an environment that also sends safety signals, reduces the blockages, reduces the
Mhm.
toxic burden, so to
Yeah.
speak, and then add the movement or vice versa, either way. But
Yeah.
those two things together, then we've supercharged the highway.
Yeah. And the reason
So
being
cool.
outside under the sun in nature is so soothing and safety inducing is because that's how we evolved, right?
Right.
So again, another input that is reminding our system, oh, okay, this is familiar.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm reading a historical fiction right now, and the first chapter is, with a culture that was sort of Celtic culture predating the Roman invasion of England. Okay. And it was the narrator is this little boy, and he's like, and then my mother sat down with some other women to make baskets in the sun while the children played outside, and we probably would have stayed there all afternoon had not, and then some piece of history interrupts this
Mm.
at the moment. But what stuck for me was like, oh yeah, they were just going to sit outside all afternoon talking and weaving
Yeah,
and having the children play around. And that's like was a normal day for a human.
yeah,
And that's what we were sort of our bodies we're meant to do is have that type of day on a regular basis.
Yeah. Well, and again, the fact that that was the case not, up to just 100 years ago, 150 years ago, we haven't had chance to adapt, right?
Right.
I don't
Like
know that I
we're
want us to be able to
yeah,
adapt because
like
that's
we're
just
expecting
wrong.
our systems to operate at a pace that is,
Mhm,
yeah, like completely out of alignment with
mhm.
the way that we evolved, which included, yeah, these long periods of what we would now call restorative time. It used to just be
Yeah,
called life.
it was called life. Well, it's interesting because I'm learning all these cool things in naturopath school, and I'm thinking, well, why? So herbs, why do certain herbs work? Homeopathics, the diet is still such a big deal in naturopathic circles, and as it should be, but we've lost the forest for the trees because all these things, and think about traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic practices and everything, they all used to work just fine because the assumption that the circadian rhythm was in place and that the proper cellular hydration mechanisms were working, nobody had to think about that before implementing the
Right.
traditional Chinese medicine herbs for, menopause health or, what have you.
Yeah.
Now, those herbs don't work.
Right.
They don't
Because
work the way they
we don't
used
have the
to
voltage. We don't
because
have
we don't
our
have the
body is not
proper foundation.
communicating the way it's supposed to be.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, pretty crazy.
It's pretty crazy. So, but so good to know. Amanda, thank you so much. This is just, I'm gonna digest this for a while. And yeah, I'm excited. So just my daughter and I did a session with Amanda to start learning these techniques, and it's yeah, they're very effective. I often just get the urge now to like lie on the floor on my stomach and wiggle.
Oh,
Like you
good. Okay,
do.
good.
That's good. So let us know how people can work with you because you do work virtually. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. So I started my own health coaching company called Odaios Wellness. And so you can put the website
Yeah, I'll put the link to your
somewhere.
website
Yeah.
in the show notes.
Mhm.
In case someone's like driving and they're just listening, can you spell that?
Yeah, Odaios Wellness. Odaios is a Greek word, Horaios. And it's a mouthful. People told me, oh, you have to pick a better, easier name for your business. And I just kept coming back to this. Odaios means the perfect time,
Mm,
the beautiful time. And
beautiful.
this is my vision for this business is this is the time for your healing, for your
Yes.
true healing. And I'm inspired because things have fallen into place and it's been just a beautiful journey and I'm excited to see where it goes. And so, yeah, the name stuck. People are going to have to figure it out and figure out how to roll the R too.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I love it. It's a gorgeous word, and we'll put that website in the show notes. And yeah, you can book a consult with Amanda. She does one-on-one sessions, and you could learn these. Yeah, you can learn them virtually. These
mhm.
movements. Um,
Yeah, I
it's really
started
fun.
a group coaching that's still in its infancy, but
Oh,
I
fantastic!
have a desire for that to grow. I think
Yeah,
there's method to the madness of community, and
absolutely. Oh,
I'm
that'd be fun
experiencing
to do
it.
in a group, everyone together learning this.
Yeah, yeah. So we do
Yeah.
that, and also through brmtusa.com.
Hmm.
Um, we teach courses for people who want to add this tool to their toolkit. And so they can take levels 1, 2, and 3 of BRMT and a lot of OTs and PTs and chiropractors have taken the course over the last couple decades. I was just a regular mom coming in because I wanted to learn. There's
Yeah.
a lot of parents taking it now, social workers, occupational
Well, a mom
therapists.
with a PhD in neuroscience.
But but there's a need. And the
Yeah.
beauty again of this technique is moms can do this with their babies,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Oh, I see your point. Yeah. So anyone can come in and learn this.
Yeah.
You don't have
And
to
so
be a practitioner necessarily.
exactly. No,
Okay.
lactation
Got it.
consultants, nurses and NICUs. We need to
Mm.
get more of our nurses in the NICU
Oh, yeah, for
and in
sure.
labor and delivery floors to do these things with newborns and then show these to new moms. How beautiful is that, right?
Yes.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's a course open to anybody. My mom took it this last time. And she's in her 70s dealing with her own aches and pains, but she and one of my good friends who's a PT and a kinesiologist by training and who's also adopting this into her toolkit did it together. And it was so cool to see because it opens such a whole new way of looking at your body if you're,
Yeah.
that generation, the baby boomer
Yeah.
generation. And oh, okay, this isn't that I'm wrong or that something's wrong with me. Maybe I just need to lie in my bed and do a few rocks and just breathe. And I don't have to
Right.
worry about getting another appointment or,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a great point to end on, right? Like there's so much we can do
Mhm. Yeah.
so that we don't end up needing all those appointments down the road, or we can reduce them if we have them all right now. Like there's just so much fun stuff we can do um, at home
Yeah.
with
Take,
a little guidance. I think it's important. I want everyone to have
no,
practitioner in their
absolutely.
life, but yeah, it doesn't have to be complicated.
No, it doesn't. And here's the thing, right? Like with so many of these healing modalities, when you remove a break, other things get to come up to the surface. And so
Right.
I just have to say this, your healing isn't always pretty. In fact, healing is usually not pretty.
Yes. That's a
Healing,
great point.
healing
It's
is
like,
very
okay, the
ugly.
back pain is resolved, but now I'm like sad all the time. What's going on?
Well,
Or
what
whatever.
what was causing that back pain in the first place? What
Right.
led to that primitive reflex being activated again in the first place?
Yeah.
So we get to do the work. I mean, we have the option to not.
Right. So it's like the symptom that's like poking through the surface
Yep.
is what one we're going to pay attention to.
Yeah.
So we heal to resolve that, but then there might be something a little deeper down and a little deeper down.
And once you go on this amazing journey, you really become a gamer of real life
Yeah.
because it becomes this game of leveling up, right?
Yeah.
And so you level up in the back pain department only to start at zero in the next level where everything sucks and you don't know
Yeah,
where
that's
anything
true.
is. But then you keep going and then you level up. So yeah, but it's okay because
What
it's
else are we gonna do?
well, you have no choice.
Yeah.
Once you get to this point, there's no turning back. It's like labor. When you
Yeah.
have your baby and the baby's crowning,
Yeah. You're like, I don't do
there's
this anymore.
there's
I
no
quit.
turning back.
I quit. Yeah.
There's no turning back, right?
Yeah, there's not. We're here. Life is happening.
So we might as well do it in
We
community
might as well, yeah, hang
and
out
with
and
each other. Yeah.
chat about primitive reflex and roll around on the floor.
Yeah.
Or the grass, the grass.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amanda. This was lovely. I look forward to doing it again. I feel like we just only touched the surface and we could have lots more chat. So
Yeah, I know.
do
I
it.
feel like I was all over the place, but hopefully this will make sense to the listener. And
Oh, it was amazing. I learned
there's
so
there's so
much,
much more that I want to
so
share.
much.
I mean,
Okay,
we
we'll
didn't
do.
even go into limbic system stuff. So yeah.
Whew. Okay, part 2.
Thanks,
Thank
Meredith.
you. Woohoo! You made it to the end of another episode. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploratory adventure into new realms. Your energy and support are building a different world, and I am so grateful to be on this journey with you. Take care and thanks.